What if you gave your pet snake access to an entire spare bedroom? I think probably many of us have had that thought. You know, you see your animal or you see your snake maybe pacing the glass, and maybe you're like myself. When you see that, you let them out, you let them crawl around on the floor and whatnot. But what if they actually had access to the entire room? I think so many of us have that dream as a possibility. You know, snake-proof a room and make a jungle gym out of it. I don't know how many of us actually have a spare room that we can dedicate that towards, but that is what we discussed today on this episode. I have Greg Bartucca on the podcast of Reptile Studio. You can find him on Instagram, and he has essentially dedicated his spare room in his condo for his carpet python enclosure. She has her enclosure in that room, but basically the glass is open and she has access to the greater room, and he has this whole apparatus of jungle gym all kind of bolted onto the ceiling and into the walls. And it's just we discuss how he got into it, how he's kind of snake-proofed the room to make this work, and some of the behavior changes he's made or he's seen in the animal, and how he just makes this work, and whether it's practical for people to do, and whether it's actually maybe important for people to provide that opportunity. And we discuss the worst-case scenario if you were to have such a large enclosure, and that is getting snake mites. And Greg talks about how he somehow randomly got snake mites, even though he basically just has one snake. And he discusses how he treated his carpet python using NexGard, and how they actually worked when he's dealing with such a large, kind of elaborate enclosure. That's a big difference from having snake mites in a small tub. He has it in essentially a huge room. So he walks us through how that worked and how he treated it using NexGard, which I think for even if you don't have an animal in a huge elaborate enclosure, it's a really good, important piece of content. So I hope you enjoy this episode, and hopefully you'll be inspired to provide your animal with even just a little bit more enrichment, or maybe some more space every once in a while. I know I certainly am motivated to do that after talking to Greg. So enjoy the podcast, and we'll catch you afterwards. This podcast is all about improving your reptile husbandry. However, I know not everybody has the time or the money to go out and spend thousands of dollars doing custom builds. Thankfully, friend of the podcast, Josh Halter, aka the Bio Dude, is working hard to make better care more accessible. He makes turnkey bioactive kits for leopard geckos, ball pythons, tortoises, invertebrates, dart frogs, and the list continues to grow. He has spent years testing and perfecting these handcrafted substrates and dietary supplements to create the most effective products. If you visit thebiodude.com, you will see he is a proud supporter of both USARK and responsible reptile keeping, and there is an option to donate to either at checkout. Well, Greg, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, I'm real excited to be here. I've been dying to get on here for, I think, years now.
Well, I'm excited to have you. And for those who are just listening to audio, Greg is standing in what looks like basically a free roam room for a snake. So we're going to talk about that because he has a really kind of interesting concept he's been working on. But I'd love to hear just a little bit more about your kind of reptile journey. I know you've been listening to the podcast for a long time. I don't know if your reptile journey started more recently, like within the last few years, or if it's something that you started as a child. So maybe just give us kind of the Coles notes of how you got into this hobby.
Yeah. So, it's kind of like the cliche answer. But when I was little, I started going out hiking with my father and stuff. And we would always flip rocks and flip, logs and stuff and look for salamanders. And sometimes we would find a ringneck snake. We would see garter snakes and stuff. And my father got me a leopard gecko when I don't even know how old I was. I was probably like maybe 8, 9 years old, something around that. And of course, I'm 39 now. So, 8 or 9, what we do for care, that what we did then is nothing compared to what we do now. And unfortunately, that leopard gecko kind of succumbed to improper care. I think it was not having like a moist hide. But so it sort of started, back then when I was little. And then years later, life happened and a lot of drama in my childhood, and the sort of like reptile side of things sort of went away. And it really wasn't until 2012 when I got my current leopard gecko. And I only had her for a long time. And then around COVID, around the COVID time, which is like a really popular answer I've heard people say.
Yeah.
Is when I got a snake. I got a corn snake, you know. And I ended up with like a kind of like a handful of things, which sort of took my focus off of Daria, my carpet python. And I was like not okay with that, so I decided like let me scale things back and keep things like really simple, and so I can like focus on providing more for her, and that's brings me to like today.
So when you say scale back, do you mean move animals onto different homes, or do you mean the way you're caring for them?
Yeah, so I donated some stuff to Brian Parkhurst, who you were on our podcast.
Yes. Yeah.
When we had that podcast, he has a reptile rescue. I donated some stuff to him. He bought my hawk-nosed snake, which in hindsight, I actually kind of miss her. Because they have a lot of character.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was easier to just maintain a very small amount.
Yes, and now you've kind of taken keeping to an extreme that we're definitely going to dig into. But maybe just update us. Do you just like what you have the leopard gecko and Daria the carpet python? Do you have anything else?
Yes, so I have the leopard gecko, the carpet python. I have a horned frog, South American horned frog or Pac-Man frog. It's a male, and he calls a lot, especially when there's music playing. Mm-hmm. If I have music playing in this room, for whatever reason, it triggers him to start calling. And I also have a pair of Tachydromus, the Asian long-tailed grass lizards. Yeah. They're the Tachydromus sexlineatus ocellatus, which is a subspecies of the sexlineatus. And they had eggs. They produced eggs. So now I have 3 hatchlings, but I'm actually looking to get rid of them also, move them onto a permanent home, because that's just more responsibility that I don't want anymore.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I definitely want to, as you're saying, now you have more time to expand your care for the animals that you do have, like reducing the quantity. And maybe you could describe for people where you're standing. Like, is this a spare room in your house?
Yeah. So my house, it's a condo. It's a 1-level condo, 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, living room, kitchen room, dining room. The spare bedroom is essentially, it's what I call Daria's room. So she has full reign of this room if she chooses, and she basically chooses to do that, which is why I ended up getting one of many to come. I got a UV bulb over in the upper corner, which I turned off for this, but yeah. So I snake proofed this room, and it's hers.
So I want to talk about the snake proofing, and I want to talk about the setup itself. But first, tell me about the decision to do that. So for those who are listening and those who maybe, if you can't see, she has her kind of regular enclosure. And I think what Greg does is just leave the door open, and she can come and go from her regular enclosure as she pleases. And she has access to the greater room that she's in, like a typical bedroom with all these contraptions and climbing ropes and sticks and branches and plants and all these different things. So that is quite a big commitment. A, just to sacrifice an entire room for the snake, but also B, there's the risk of the animal getting hurt, and just snake proofing in general. Anybody that keeps snakes knows that they're very sneaky, and they can get through things that you wouldn't think, and they can disappear in a house relatively easy. So what made you decide to even attempt this?
So my opinions on husbandry and basically like animal keeping in general has changed a lot over the last few years. I've definitely shifted my mindset more towards like the conservation side of things, and less of the keeping side of things, because if I'm being honest, I don't even like the word keeping, because I don't keep my cats. Like, I have my cat, like cats are a part of my family. like people say, oh, I have 2 children, and they say, oh, I have 3 dogs and I have 2 cats. Like that sort of implies like sort of like a family unit.
Yes.
And although I understand the differences between a cat and a dog and a snake or a leopard gecko, my approach to husbandry isn't less for one than it is for the other.
Mm.
And I think that sort of like helped me shift my focus to doing that, and like following people like A.B. Benzie from Happy Basins and Lori Tarini, seeing what they provide for their animals was a huge inspiration, because when it started with just like an old cat tower that I would let Daria come out and explore the tower, but then she would go back into her enclosure. And as time went on, I realized that that's, for me personally, that's not enough. And because they're active snakes.
Yeah.
I mean, they're active during the day and they're active at night. It varies depending on, I don't even know the factors, but it varies. Yeah. So knowing that stuff, I was like, she needs to have more space.
And it's amazing, like you provide, you provide the space and she uses the space, and we'll talk about that as well. But why don't we get into like the kind of the details of what you did to the room to make it snake proof, is for one, and then also make it so it's usable for her, because just having an empty spare room and having the snake enclosure open is not going to be enough for a snake to use. They can crawl around on the floor and whatnot, but you've added all these extra things. So you can, in your mind, you can imagine somebody who has a blank spare room. What would they need to do to that spare room to kind of replicate what you've done?
Yeah, so I did everything like on a super budget. Because in an ideal world, I would like to like basically chop the room in half and make half of the room like a real full enclosure with like misting systems and soil on the floor and the whole thing. So everything I did here was on a budget, and like I would buy rope off Amazon, and I would find the studs on the wall and attach the rope to the wall with studs using like a hook, a half clamp kind of shaped thing. And put that in, and then hang all the sticks and all the stuff like from the rope.
It's almost like a hammock kind of apparatus that you have over your head here with like a pretty thick rope.
Yeah, it is. It's like I want to say this is a 1-inch rope, and I have a 1.5-inch rope that I haven't put up yet, because I want to even extend that to like in front of me. There's nothing. It's just the ceiling. Gotcha. So I'm going to add more of what's behind me, up above me, and in front of me also. And then I got this ladder here that, I can take it down, but it'll swing down and rest in the opening of her enclosure. And she can come out onto that, but she'll come out even with the ladder hanging up like that. She still comes out and uses the ladder to get to where she wants to go. Gotcha. So I don't even bother taking it down anymore.
Yeah, she doesn't need it.
Yeah, but everything was like super cheap. And I understand a lot of people can't do even this. This is done over a couple of years. It's all slowly started building and coming together. And as far as like snake proofing, there really wasn't much in this room I had to do. Under my door, which she can't fit under there anymore anyway. But I have one of those foam things under the door to keep like drafts out.
Yes. Yeah.
And then I don't want her in the closet, because she was going into the closet. So along the sides, I have like the sliding closet doors. Along the side, I have this like thick foam stuff that blocks the gap between the door and the side of the wall. So she can't get through that gap anymore, because she was sticking her nose in there and her body was like pushing the door open. But as of right now, she hasn't done that since I put that gap there, or that foam there.
Now, what about? Do you have any like register like vents, like air duct system on the floor or anything?
Nothing on the floor. I have an AC vents on the ceiling.
Okay.
Well, I actually keep that closed when the AC in the summertime,
Yes. Yeah.
just to help keep this room up to a more appropriate temperature. Um, but the spaces in the grate are like a quarter inch
Yeah.
thick.
Yeah. She'll never fit through that. Yeah.
So in the wintertime, I'll um, open the grate up, and it's fine. It's just there's nothing she can do.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so for a larger snake, it's a lot easier to snake proof than it is for a smaller snake.
Yes. Now, I'd love to hear about just her behavior in general. I mean, I'm guessing that maybe it took her some more time to get used to the additional space, but maybe walk us through how does this work for her? You have the enclosure door open, and maybe walk us through those early days. Was she pretty immediate to jump out and start exploring everything, or did it take her days? Like, did you think, did I waste my time doing this? She's just going to sit in her closure, or tell us about that.
Yeah, so it did take her a long time. Um, Now I say a long time. I mean she's not even 5 years old. Um, but the first 2 years, um, I would say she I would have to go into the enclosure to get her.
Mm.
And I don't do that anymore, unless I have to do it. Um, she would stick her head out of the enclosure, maybe like 3 or 4 inches, but that's as far as she would go. Um, I don't exactly know what, if anything, changed to give her that confidence to actually fully come out of the enclosure. Um, but eventually, that's what happened. Is she eventually started coming out on her own, and would even put herself away on her own,
Mm.
which is right at the beginning when I first put all the stuff up. She would start coming out and going back on her own. And as I added more stuff, she eventually started staying out, which is why I got the UV light in the corner for her, because that's like her kind of relaxing spot is up in the top corner.
Mm.
Yeah.
So now that she's sort of comfortable with it and she's comfortable with everything in there, can you just walk us through what her typical behavior might be? You know, she's obviously spending some time in her enclosure and sometimes out, but is it totally random, or is there a pattern to her behavior?
So I think that she comes out more often. I think when she's looking for food.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say she's more inclined to explore after a long time has passed when she hasn't eaten. But I'm not 100% sure about that because she's never eaten out here. She's only eaten in her enclosure.
Is that something intentionally on your part? Like you specifically feed her in there, or is that just when that's where she is when you're ready to feed her?
Both. That is where she is when I'm ready to feed her. But when I first got her, I immediately started target training her. And she didn't have access to the room.
Mm.
So when she eats, it's target training. And it's always been inside of her enclosure.
Gotcha.
Now, it's not to say I wouldn't feed her outside the enclosure, but I would probably try and target her back into the enclosure to eat, just to have that like routine.
Yes.
Unfortunately, the flip side of that is if she doesn't poop right away, within a few days or a week, she'll end up coming out and pooping on the floor.
That was going to be my next question. Yeah.
Yeah. So ask the question because that's a good one.
Yeah. She'll poop on the floor sometimes.
Yeah. And the first time it happened, it was a nightmare, because it was not a solid poop.
Mm.
And I mean, every surface in here was covered, had something some speck of poop on it.
Oh.
I had to basically just disinfect this entire room from top to bottom. But I still let her come out.
Yeah.
Because, you know what, like, to spend, a few hours disinfecting the room and cleaning everything is small compared to her experience being able to have all the space,
Especially if that's not a super common regular thing. And I find for whatever reason, I mean, I have one carpet python, but I find this with him as well, is his feces will be like 80% of the time solid, and then 20% of the time it'll be a little bit looser. And I don't know if there's like a sensitivity with the prey item that, something, maybe there's something in the belly of the feeder rat or whatever I happened to feed that time. But sometimes you'll get those looser stools. And so hopefully, as long as that's not like a regular thing for her, then the cleaning isn't the end of the world, like you said.
Yeah, no, and that was, as of today, if I can, I want to say that was the only time that I can recall that she had a loose stool.
Yeah, so you're in the clear there.
Yeah, for now.
Now, when you feed her, does she tend to just digest in her enclosure? Like, you have some, I'm sure, like a halogen bulb or something in the enclosure that's providing her some infrared, and I don't know if you have that anywhere else in the room. Will she instinctively stay in her enclosure until she's sort of done digesting?
So after I feed her, I just leave the door shut.
Okay.
Because she does go over to the one corner of her enclosure where I have the halogen bulb, and she'll sit there, like, even at night when the light's been off. I'll wake up in the morning and she'll still be there in that same spot. So I'm not entirely sure if she ate out of the enclosure, if she would stay out, or if she would eventually find her way back in. Like, I'm not sure. I mean, it's something that I want to test.
Yeah, you have the freedom to do and test all these different concepts as you get more comfortable and as she learns the space better, right?
Yeah, because, I mean, it's obvious they have some level of awareness of their surroundings, because she goes to the same corner of the room all the time.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean she doesn't explore everything, but she'll end up in that same corner. So I want to think that when it comes to digestion, if she's like, wait, it's not warm enough up here, she'll find her way back into her enclosure under that bulb. But I may actually add a basking lamp in that same corner, just because she likes to be there.
Yeah. I mean, it is fascinating to think that she's mapped out this space. Like I said, if she's continuing to return to a similar spot, she obviously knows exactly where she's going and she's familiar with everything. And it's just such a difference from what many of us keep our snakes in a much smaller enclosure. Just to see an animal using such a large space, it does really kind of make you think. Have you ever walked into the room and gone, where the hell is she? And then have to, like, a panic attack looking for her? Yeah.
So there was one time where I was looking around for a while, looking through her enclosure, looking at all the nooks and crannies, like, above me. And, sometimes she would crawl into this little thing right here, which is like full of all the lamps.
Yeah, it's like a little basket.
She would go in there between all the lamps and stuff and hang out in there a few times. But there was one time when I came in, and I'm looking around, and then behind this bookshelf right here, she was actually on the floor, which with her, I don't look on the floor, because I have videos on my Instagram of her, like, when I've taken her, like, into my bedroom, which has carpeting. She doesn't like to touch the carpet. She was on, like, a stick that was like the same width as her at her fattest point, and it was like the floor is lava. Like, she was balancing herself on that stick just to avoid touching the floor. So I don't think to look down at the floor, but she was behind this case, but she wasn't just hanging out there. I walked in and she was actually coming towards the door where I walked in. And I think this is also on an Instagram video. She, like, kind of like periscoped her head up towards me. which later I found out that she probably wanted me to get all the spider webs that were all over her face. Because she had spider webs. I mean, she was covered in spider webs. Like her tongue would come out and she would like keep her mouth open, like move her tongue around and stuff. Like they were just, her face was covered. Yeah. So, yeah, that was the one time where I couldn't find her. And then when I did, it was like kind of a cool moment.
The following is a paid advertisement for True Chroma by Faunalux. Do you ever wonder what reptiles actually see? Their visual world is totally different than ours. We are trichromats and they are tetrachromats, which means we have 3 cones, which are visual receptors for detecting color, one for blue, one for green, and one for red, and they actually have 4. Their 4th one allows them to detect color in the ultraviolet range, which is totally invisible for our eyes. What this means practically for reptile keepers is that most of the LED visual lights on the market are catered to human vision. We see it as bright white light because all 3 of our cones are being activated, but most of those products do not contain light in the UVA area, which means that for a reptile, it is not going to be white light because all 4 of their cones are not being activated. Who knows what they see, but it's not going to be that pure white bright light that we find so appealing. The Faunalux True Chroma Spotlight LED is the world's first lamp to utilize trademarked reptile vision technology to cater to our animals. With a wide visible spectrum output, high color rendering, and natural proportions of essential UVA-1 light, your animal experiences richer colors, improved awareness, and better welfare. It is that simple. True Chroma is laboratory tested, used in zoos, built to last, and they fit right into your standard ceramic screw-in fixture. It's precision lighting designed for reptiles, birds, and other exotic pets. True Chroma by Faunalux, educated by nature. Head to fauna-lux.com to find out more. That's amazing. And do you have cameras? You have cameras set up in there, right? Because I think some of that videos you have on your Instagram is you kind of finding her and whatnot. So tell us about like what you're using for cameras or surveillance.
Yeah. So right now I just have one Wise camera. WYZE.
Yeah.
Up in the top of the room, which basically you get a view of the entire room. I did try putting a camera in her enclosure, but she knocked it down almost immediately.
Okay, yeah, classic.
I would have to find a way to like secure it, like really secure it to where it can't be like moved or bent. But with the Wise camera, it's you really can't do that because there's so many different ways to move it and shift it. But in my leopard gecko enclosure, I also have a Wise camera in there. So that's what I have for surveillance.
Okay, cool. So then if you were to, like, if someone were to ask you, like, recommend that, or if someone was interested in replicating something similar, I think it's maybe a big ask for some people to dedicate a huge room, but like, what are some things that somebody could do if they don't have as much space as you have to dedicate to something that could essentially be similar? You know, you're not going to get the same full effect of giving a snake a total free range, but are there some things that you would do if you didn't have the same amount of space? Like just any listener, like what can I do to give my animal some more freedom?
Yeah. So, a few months back, Amy Benzie and I started planning like a roundtable discussion, and the topic was going to be about like advancing, animal care, advanced like enrichment tactics and opportunities and stuff. And one of the things that we talked about doing during that was, that exact question that you just asked about what can somebody do who, for whatever reason, can't do what I've done in here. And that goes back to what I said, earlier about having a cat tower. I had a cat tower that she would come out and explore, and target training, was like another form of enrichment. But I've also sort of become kind of it might be controversial, but I've sort of become sort of like a hard ass lately about what we provide these animals. So my gut says, if you can't do this, you shouldn't have one.
Mm-hmm.
But my brain says, I can't dictate that, and I was that person that didn't do that. So I know that's not a reality. So just providing as much enrichment as possible is the way to go. And Shira Loa from Snake Therapy actually took over that project because the original recording didn't save for some reason. So if anyone wants to watch what came of that, they can watch that on Shira Loa's YouTube channel. She had Mariah Healy and Amy and Lori and Abby from the Curly Haired Keeper on, and they talked about this exact topic. It was awesome. So I definitely encourage people to watch that. But I mean, there's so many ways to provide enrichment, and Mariah Healy said it the best. And I'm paraphrasing because I don't exactly know. I can't even do that. They can go watch. Go watch that episode on Shira's.
I'll make sure that's in the show notes. So they don't have to go dig for it.
Yeah, you should. Because Mariah talks about like the 3 types of enrichment. And whatever that means to the person who has the pet, or what it means for that pet is up to them. But it was pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I've even thought about doing different things. Like, let's just say you can't let a snake free roam. Like, if you a good example would be like if you live in an apartment or something, and you're sharing a bunch of walls with people, you maybe don't want to risk having a snake like end up in someone else's laundry basket type thing. Especially now, there's so many like real cheap enclosures that are just kind of the cheap PVC that I guess maybe with the tariffs it's a different story, but there used to be lots of available kind of really inexpensive enclosures that you could almost cube together and create like maybe you drill through the hole or through the floor of one and then drill into the screen or the top ceiling of another, and then you're thinking of more like a hamster tube situation where you're giving the snake a lot of access within a bunch of different enclosures that are all connected, and maybe you could even have sliding doors so they don't always have access, but that would give them more space without giving them free roam space. Like, I sort of understand the hesitation of free roam space, but to just provide more space, you could use enclosures to do that.
Yeah, and I actually did that. I had 2. So her basically enclosure, like her, what I call like her bed, it's just a 4x2 Zen habitat.
Yeah.
But I had 2 Zen habitats. In the beginning, what I'd done was I connected the 2 Zen habitats with an elbow, a 3-inch PVC elbow, where my father and I put it together. We drilled out one side of one and the other side of another, and put the elbow in there. And that's kind of how it started.
Did that work well? Did she use both sides?
Yes, she did use both sides. She stayed mainly in her like current side where she's in, but she spent a lot of time in the tube also, like curled up. And even now she's like pushing 7 feet, and the tube is probably like, if you opened it up, it would probably be like a foot long. She still gets all 6+ feet of herself into that 90-degree tube.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and because that's what's up in the corner where I put the UV. So I kept that because she loves it.
Yeah. Awesome. Are there any other tips or anything that you would have for somebody that maybe is doing something like things? I remember before we originally recorded, one kind of a disaster had happened to you was, I think some things had fallen down from the ceiling. Thankfully the animal was totally unharmed, but maybe that's a little learning lesson for people. You had some apparatus set up and it just didn't hold. So what happened there?
Yeah. So, the condos that were built, my condo was built in, I think, 1989. And I mean, they might still do this today, but I didn't know that at the time. And I know that like in a home, the studs are supposed to line up with the ceiling joists.
Mm.
So I would find the stud in the wall, and then I would find what I thought was a joist, and I would drill into that, and then screw whatever it was into that, the ropes, this and that, different things. But come to find out later on that it's actually like a drop ceiling, which, I mean, I didn't know anything about that. I mean, my father's a carpenter. I'm not. He's the one that figured it out. But obviously, had I known that, I wouldn't have done what you see above me then. It's since been remedied now. Like, everything's just into the anchor to the stud in the walls.
Yeah. So you're just connected to the walls now. No more ceiling holes.
Yeah. There's a couple things that I have in the ceiling that are anchored in.
Yes.
With those really thick, like spiral shaped wall anchors.
Yeah.
That hold pretty well, but like the bulk of the weight is just held from the wall.
The best part about providing high-quality reptile husbandry is you get to develop a long-term relationship with your animal. Meet Jackson, my 18-year-old crested gecko. Jackson lives on the BioDudes Terrafauna substrate, which is one of their substrates that's specifically designed for warm biomes and humidity spikes. Like all other BioDudes substrates, it contains organic content to help support the plant life in Jackson's vivarium. It also holds moisture very well, which means humidity is never an issue, even in my dry climate. Another favorite of mine is the BioDudes Bug Grub. This is a supplement powder made from natural ingredients like carrots, beets, spirulina, oats, and potatoes. Everybody knows how important gut-loading feeder insects is, and this simplifies it for me and allows me to be confident when I feed both Jackson and my tarantulas that they're getting the nutrients they need to thrive. Also, if you have a lot of babies right now, this is a great way to help fortify the diets of neonatal reptiles. The BioDude has a ton of great educational content on both his YouTube channel and the website, all about bioactive care, and it's just one of those brands that's doing their part to push herpeticulture into a positive direction and give reptile keeping a better name. Gotcha. Okay, so that's a good thing. That's a good thing for people. Use a stud finder, and if you're going to have anything into non-studs, heavy anchors.
Yeah, and not a lot of weight.
yeah, not a lot of weight.
Yeah, anything that's for the ceiling, not a lot of weight.
Yeah. Well, it's really cool. I love watching projects like this develop. It's amazing watching, giving an animal that extra space and actually seeing them utilize it. I mean, we've talked about this millions of times on the podcast, and I know it's kind of like a trope at this point where people will say, well, snakes don't, they stay in their hides all day anyway, but when you give them the space, they actually don't. And a lot of times too, it's, there's movement happening when you're not in the room, or like you said, when they're hungry, they're going to be, exploring, and the fact that she's mapping out such a large area is fascinating. Now, one of the things that also recently happened, which I think if anyone could think of the worst case scenario in an enclosure, like we'll call this room an enclosure, it would be mites. And you had that worst case scenario happen to you as well.
Yeah.
If you are just were keeping, I'm not advocating for this, but if you were keeping in a tub on paper towel, that's a decently easy thing to deal with. But you have this huge enclosure, this huge space with millions of nooks and crannies, and somehow she ended up with mites. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So to this day, I still don't know how she ended up with mites.
Because you didn't bring in any new animals recently.
No. And everything I do is if I do bring something in, it's, quarantined for at least 3 months. But one thing I did learn very recently is that, now I don't know if this is like scientifically accurate, but somebody had told me that snake mites can live like dormant in the freezer, like in a house freezer. And that it's possible that somewhere where I got a feeder rat may have had mites on it from whatever facility it came from. And when it was thawed out and put in the enclosure, maybe the mites got off the rat somehow, I mean, everything that I could think of is very it's like a stretch.
Mm-hmm.
But I know people that keep their feeders in sub-zero freezers for that reason. So that's really the only possible thing.
I've also heard
that I can think
substrates
of
too.
is-
Like, I don't know where you get your substrate, but people say if you buy substrate from a particularly like a larger reptile specific store, that could be a risk of contamination there. You know, that's why maybe people will argue you should buy substrates from like a gardening store, because the chance of snake mites being on there is basically zero, where the chance of snake mites being in a bag of substrate from a reptile store is higher. So that could have been, I don't know where you buy your substrate, but it's definitely a good word of warning for people that even if you have one snake and you're not bringing in any new snakes, mites are actually still on the table, even though it could be like 0.5% chance. Like for me, I never think about mites because I'm like, I'm never bringing anything new in. I don't have any, I'm not quarantining anything at any time, but it can still somehow happen to you, which is just a bizarre, like you must have been just scratching your head.
I was panicking. Like my personality type is somebody who's like, I have anxiety, ADHD, like all of that really fun stuff. So I was panicking. One of the side effects of all that is like when I panic, I do nothing.
Mm.
So it was like worry, but don't do anything about it. Because in my head, it was like, I have to rip this whole room down, take apart everything, disinfect everything, clean everything. It's going to be the biggest nightmare of my life. I don't want to do it. Which then led me onto finding a video from Reptiles and Research from Liam.
Yeah.
About NexGard. And that's the route that I took was giving NexGard.
So for those who have no idea what that is, they should also go watch Liam's video because I think he did a really good video on it. But I would love to hear your experience with it. So tell us what it is and kind of how it functions.
Yeah. So NexGard is actually a dog flea treatment, flea and tick preventative treatment. And now in the US, it's prescription based, which Liam talks about in his video. So it's not as easy to get in the United States unless you have really good like connections with vets or whatever. So I reached out to people who had dogs, and luckily a friend of my friend had a prescription of the chewable NexGard for her dog, and she actually gave me that prescription. So now I wish I could remember like how I measured it out, because a lot of the research that I see online about administering NexGard to snakes, it's in the liquid form. But what I had learned from Liam is from Reptiles and Research is about the chewable form and cutting it up. Now, because when you cut something, a chewable up, like the medicine isn't in every.
Yes, it's not evenly distributed through the gummy,
right,
for lack of a better word. Like the intention is to eat the whole gummy.
Right. So obviously I can't do that with a snake. But on Damascus.co, there is a like a PDF that tells you how to break down the amount. So weigh your snake, and then weigh, chisel, or break some of the chewable off. And the good thing about it is you can mold it. Once it's off, you can mold it into a shape, and to weigh that. And then now, like math stuff like that, like I'm terrible with like math. I don't remember at all what the amount was. Like I'm not a vet, so I'm not going to say do do that.
But you got that off of Thomas's website.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll make sure that's in the show notes as well. So if they go to Damascus.co, they can actually find that PDF that will walk you through. Is that where you got the math from?
Yeah, it was .co.uk.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, that's where I got it. And Shira actually helped me out figuring it out, because that's like that all that like math thing, is like overwhelming to me. So she actually helped me figure out how to read it as like a normal person, not a super smart person. which, I mean, I am super smart, but I'm also extremely overwhelmed easily. So
Yeah.
like when things are broken down simple, it's like way easier for me to digest that info. Um, so that's what I did. Um, and I actually administered it twice.
So how do you administer
So,
the chewable? Do you just roll it up and throw it into the mouth of a feeder?
yeah, that's exactly what I did. The first
Gotcha.
time I shoved it into the mouth of a chick. Um, and then about a month later, I soaked Daria again, and I still saw mites. There was probably like maybe like three small. I mean, there's all the mites are small, but there were three like very small mites. Like, you know, I would guess they'd be like juvenile mites. So the next time I fed her, I gave her another dose, and I put it into a rat and gave her the rat. Um, and then the last two times that I soaked her, there were no mites, and her eyes cleared up. I don't know if you saw that anything that I posted about that, but her eyes, they developed this like white, sort of like swollen, like white, like the inner eye, sort of like popping out. That's the best way I can describe it.
Interesting. And so that was more of a reaction. Yeah, we can put the pictures in the video. That was more of a reaction to them, because mites tend to gather around the eye socket of a snake. Was that more of a reaction to that, do you think?
So I don't know, because Jeremy Turgeon from Brassman Reptiles also helped me out a lot with this, and he said that that's for carpet pythons, that's a common reaction to mites, is that like puffy like inner eye happening. I don't know if it's from the actual, I don't know if there was actual mites in the eye. I didn't see any. I saw them like under her chin, you know, and on the underside of her mostly. But that's how I knew that it was mites after talking, because originally I thought that she had like an infection from when my father and I were doing, we're like drilling and stuff in here, that maybe some of the particles had gotten circulated throughout the room and gotten her eyes. I was adamant that it wasn't mites until it was.
So when you soaked her the first time, how many mites popped off? Like how much were floating on the surface?
So they were sunken.
Okay,
they were all sunken down, because
okay.
I put a couple drops of Dawn.
Gotcha. Yeah.
On the water. There's probably like 10.
Okay, so enough for you to be like, okay, this is a problem.
Yeah. Yep. It was evident. There's no denying that it was mites.
So for people listening, if your snake has mites, soaking them is like the first thing you would do with a couple drops of just regular Dawn dish soap. That does drown the mites that are on the surface of the animal. So that's how you kind of get rid of them, but that doesn't get rid of, I guess, eggs and maybe smaller mites that are somehow hanging on for their dear life. But that's the first step, right?
Yeah, that's. I mean, I started doing that. The first time I soaked her, it was before I knew about mites. I was soaking her because I was trying to see if I could get her clean her eyes out. And when I pulled her out of that soak, I saw that there was like white stuff in the water, but like, you know, sunken down in the water, and I thought it was drywall. But Jeremy had told me that no, that's basically mite poop.
Interesting.
It's like this white, these like little tiny white flakes. So I was like, oh crap. So.
And what is the purpose of the Dawn dish soap? Is that for like to change the surface tension, or what does that do? Okay.
Yeah, it changes the surface temperature, so that way the mites can't climb up and go, you know, get out by climbing up the whatever they're in.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so they just get waterlogged and sink.
Gotcha. So then once the actual next guard is consumed, basically I think it essentially makes the snake's blood poison for the mite. It's harmless for the snake, but when the mite consumes the snake's blood, as they do their parasite, it poisons them and kills them.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So then what about pretty common practice when you have mites is, like you said, tearing everything down, sanitizing everything, cleaning every nook and cranny, making sure there's no eggs anywhere. Did you have to do that, or is it because you're able to treat with the NexGard, you're confident that you don't have to worry about some weird clutch of mite eggs that's somewhere buried inside the room?
Yeah, so I know that the life cycle of the mites, I think, is like 30 days or so. So any mites, now there could have been like some mites like right here or something, like a bunch of eggs or something right here. They're going to go look they need a host or they'll die. And Liam talks about it in the video that he made about NexGard, that eventually they're going to make their way to a host, which at this point, the only thing in here that they'll feed on is Daria.
Right.
Because the other animals are in my bedroom, and they're still in the bedroom because I'm not going to take any chances.
Yeah.
So they'll bite her, and that NexGard is still in her system even after she uses the bathroom, even after she defecates. The NexGard is still in her blood, so those mites will bite her, and they'll also die. Which is part of the reason why I did 2 doses.
Right. How long does it stay in the system?
30 days around.
Oh, that stays in 30 days. Okay. Which happens to also be the life cycle of the mites as well. So if you do 2 doses, you get 2 months of time. You should catch that late batch of eggs that potentially could still pop up before the second dose.
Yeah. And until I have any like research against it, the next time I feed her, I'll probably do another dose
just to finish it off.
Yeah. Because what I did is I would cut off a little bit of the chewable and then vacuum seal it. Because I have a little vacuum sealer. I'd vacuum seal it, and then I chop off a little piece and then vacuum seal it. So I still have a lot of it left, actually.
Yeah, that's the thing when you're dealing with this something the weight of a snake, and you have a package that's designed for like a 40-pound dog. You could treat quite a few. It's sort of a shame that you need a prescription, and maybe vets will start prescribing it for reptiles as well. I don't know if there are any vets that are listening to this or anybody that's dealt with a vet. If you've had a vet prescribe NexGard for you for a snake, which would be considered off-label use, maybe that would be interesting for everybody to know.
Yeah, and I know that's talking to people locally. To me, it was like you need a dog. Yeah. So it's not as easy as it should be.
Now, will they prescribe that for you if you have a dog that doesn't have fleas, or does it need to have an active flea infestation, or can it be preventative, just like a flea collar, and then you can get one like that?
Yeah, it's a preventative. So like for cats, it's like you get the little tube thing, and you empty the tube on the back of the neck, and it soaks into their skin. It's like the same thing. It's like every month you give your dog that chewable, and that's preventative for that month.
Okay. So if you do have a dog, you shouldn't have any issue getting it from your vet. It's just if you don't have a dog, then you need to have a friend who has a dog.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And that's different from the other conventional, like maybe I would call them older school mite treatments that I would see. Like I remember Nix was one, which I think was a lice treatment for humans that you would, and I think that's like you're trying to externally kill them, so you're actually putting poison onto them. And I've seen people run into issues where they overdose. They use too much of a concentration, which is difficult. It's easy to do because you're dealing with like a 100-pound human or like an 80-pound child trying to get rid of lice or whatever the child weighs, and then you're dealing with like a 500-gram snake or whatever it is. And I've seen snakes start to corkscrew and run into a bunch of neurological issues, and basically you've poisoned your animal, and maybe that's they're not going to recover from that situation. So this is a much easier, and I guess I should say safer, but with the caveat is make sure you go to that PDF and make sure you have your measurements correct.
Yeah. And full disclosure is, now she's been, since this happened, other than when she comes out to soak, she's been in her enclosure this entire time. Because, I don't want her until I'm confident that there's nothing, I don't want her going around the room. But at the beginning, when I started the treatment, I did spray nicks.
Okay, yeah.
In here, like on the ropes and on the ladder and like basically all the surfaces.
Just
and
to kill anything.
I got prevent the mites,
Preventamite.
Yeah. Something, so, sort of a preventamite thing. We had like 5 different like species of mites in it to eat the mites.
They were like predatory mites.
Yes, predatory mites. Yeah.
Gotcha,
So I put that in all the plants. I put it in her enclosure. So on top of the treatment, also had the predatory mites in there to also aid in getting rid of, hopefully, fully getting rid of any mites that might be lingering. So
yeah. Well, that's kind of, in some ways, it's a good story to have because NexGard is, I don't see a ton of people talking about it like Liam did that video. I think Lori has used it as well. Lori Tarini, I think I heard of it from her as well. But that is always one of the issues if you're somebody that has a lot of snakes and you want to do a real elaborate, enriched enclosure, even if it's not a huge room, even if it's just a large enclosure, it can often feel like you need to completely tear down the enclosure. And really, in reality, you probably don't. You could remove the animal, put them in a quarantine tank that's clean, that's easy to clean, treat them with the NexGard, and then you can go treat the enclosure with nicks or with predatory mites or however you want to do it. But like you said, if you get on top of that cycle, then the mites are going to die off. And once they're dead, once that last mite is dead and the last clutch of eggs is hatched and dead, they don't just appear, although sometimes they apparently do.
Yeah, right. And that's what someone else said to me too, is it may randomly pop up again in the future. I guess that's just like the nature of them. So not to let my guard down, basically.
Yeah. Parasites, they're good at existing.
Yeah.
Now, for your other, like you said, you have your leopard gecko. I assume that's going to stay with you. Have you considered building it a much larger enclosure or doing something with its kind of setup?
I mean, I'm inspired by people who do the most, obviously. But she's in a 4x2 PVC, and she's like 16 years. Someone else can figure out the math. I got her in 2012, so she's that old. She was in, for the longest time, she was in like a 40-gallon breeder, and then she was in a 40-gallon PVC with a front opening. And I had checkered garter snakes for a while, but that's one of the things that I gave to Brian from Hudson Valley Reptile Rescue, and kind of since moved into their 4x2 PVC, and it's I love it. She loves it. I mean, would I like to give her, a full room? I mean, maybe, probably not. But I mean, bigger is always better as long as there's places for them to hide and escape and stuff like that. But as far as I'm concerned, for a leopard gecko,
she's got room.
She's got more than enough space for her.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot bigger than a lot of people keep their leopard geckos in. So that's a good amount of room for her. And it goes back to the enrichment thing. Like, can you provide the right enrichment and enough enrichment? And I like right now for my animals, because I just moved, I've just removed like all the plants, and I had to do all this stuff just to make sure these enclosures could move safely. And I just hate coming in here right now because it's just like barren enclosures. They have their climbing branches and their huge water dish and things like that, but it's just lacking the enrichment that I normally have. So that'll be kind of my next job now that we're finally set up. But it's one of those things that even just cycling enrichment, putting new things in every couple of weeks, that's a huge step forward.
Yeah, and that's what I do. I mean, I still do that in Daria's enclosure, even though she has this whole room. Usually after she sheds, I'll rearrange it. I'll keep her main areas very similar, but I'll move a lot of other things around, just to keep her brain active. But I do that with Kana too, the leopard gecko. I rearrange her cage, fairly often, but keep like the staple areas that she's in a lot. I keep those as they are.
Yeah.
But
you don't want to tear apart their whole house.
Right. Yeah. But they're curious animals. Like
for sure.
Her, Kana and Daria, both, completely different species of animal, completely different types of animal, are both curious, where they'll see it and they'll go check it out.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the best things when you add a little something new and then you see the animal going to investigate and you get the tongue flicks, and it's a really rewarding part of keeping. So
yeah.
Anyway, Greg, this was it's a fascinating conversation. Just what you're doing, I think, is obviously pushing the limits. It's well beyond what many people are capable of, but it just shows you in some ways the upper end of what is possible. And if people can come up with ways to either do a jungle gym, which is a temporary situation for an animal every once in a while, or like I said, maybe you're webbing enclosures together to allow them to use more space. There's so many ways that we can provide the animals with more. Is there anything else that you wanted to say kind of on this topic, or anything else that you wanted to say before we officially wrap up?
I really want people to watch that episode that Shira did, that roundtable episode, for a myriad of reasons, but for this discussion, to listen to what Mariah Healy says about like the 3 types of enrichment. I have a computer in front of me, and I could have looked it up already, but I didn't. But I want them to hear what she says, about enrichment and stuff like that. Because someone like her, who is in this, like, this is like her job, basically, she has a lot more to say on it than I do. So, other than that, and on a side note also, as I noticed behavioral changes with Daria since opening up.
What have you noticed?
Yeah. So when I was talking about the spider web, so I'm not somebody who like touches their head. I know some people like start like touching the head and their face and stuff to like desensitize them. But I think that they're head shy for a reason. They don't have any limbs. Like, so the first thing they want to do is protect their head. And I don't want to take that like natural behavior away. But like when she had the spider webs all over her face, she let me like pick at her face, rub her face and grab her mouth and like pull and do all this stuff. And she didn't shy away. She's become more, just more relaxed. There's one video that was a video that was recorded from my Wise Cam, where she came down from up here when I was doing something, and she was just kind of like hovering above me, like really stretched out, just smelling me and like trying to like see what I was doing. And I can look back and like acknowledge her. I can put my hand up and she doesn't like flinch, stuff like that. So I noticed that the more I let her do things on her own terms, the more relaxed she is. Which sort of flies in the face of what some other popular like people in the reptile world will say. But in my experience, that's what I've noticed, just specifically with Daria. Maybe it's not true for a lot of things, but I have enough evidence from other people that I follow, that choice-based handling is just as effective as like of taming, as that like constant out of the egg or newly born like handling is. Yeah. So I think it's less about desensitizing and more about letting them be them.
Yes. I think that's a great way to wrap up. I mean, I think you allowing them to build the confidence and the trust by giving the choice-based care and choice-based handling and just choice-based options of where they are is, I think, key. And it totally makes sense to me that you're seeing a more relaxed, more confident animal and less aggressive and, all those things. So I think that's a really good motivator for people to just try this on some scale. Can you let everybody know if they want to follow your journey with this and where they can kind of keep track of your activities online?
Yeah. So basically, like mainly everything I post is on Instagram. Which is the Reptile Studio _ which also shares to Facebook, but for whatever reason, like there's nobody like goes on the Facebook page for whatever reason. But even Instagram, like, I mean, I'll continue to post everything. Because a lot of the stuff that I post, I think is, good information. A lot of it's like just entertaining, quirky stuff, but there's a lot of good information like built in there. So I would say that. I mean, I'm on TikTok also, but I sort of like very sporadic with TikTok. So just Instagram is basically the main. Yeah.
Cool.
And I do a lot of shorts on YouTube also.
At the Reptile Studio?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure that's all in the show notes for everybody. And until we'll talk again at some point, Greg. But this was awesome. I really enjoyed just hearing this story, and I'm sure the listeners will have as well. So it's a pleasure chatting with you, and thank you very much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, no, it was awesome. I appreciate it.
All right, that is the end of that episode. Greg, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast and also just being a listener and a supporter of the podcast. I know you've been a listener for a long time, and we've been messaging back and forth for years, so I really appreciate that. And it's just really cool to watch your story progress, and now you're at this point where you're right at the pinnacle of reptile care and essentially at a point where many people aren't going to be able to replicate. And to see a healthy animal interacting with such a large space is really motivating for me, and I'm sure motivating for the listeners as well. So thank you for sharing your story. Listeners, thank you for tuning in and listening to the podcast. If you enjoy the show, the best and the easiest thing you can do is just share it on social media. Give us a comment on Spotify or YouTube, and we're always looking to find new people to listen to the show, so just sharing it is an easy way to help us accomplish that goal. If you're looking for more information on the podcast, you can head to animalsathomenetwork.com. You can find the show notes there and everything else that you're interested in. You can also join us over at patreon.com/animalsathome if you'd like to help financially support the show on a monthly basis. Of course, that goes towards editing and producing the show and everything else that goes towards making sure the show can come out on a regular basis. I'm sure you have started to see some of the episodes being a little bit more spaced out, and maybe you could tell by the studio behind me that I have moved. I'm in a new space now, and it's just going to take me some time to kind of get back on my feet as far as getting regular episodes out. But I know the last few episodes have been awesome, and I continue to hope to produce really cool episodes moving forward. They may just be more spaced out than we're used to, but we'll get back onto track at some point as well. So anyway, thank you so much for tuning in to the podcast today. My name is Dylan Perrin, and big thanks to Liam Sinclair over at Reptiles and Research for editing the show. And we'll catch everybody in the next episode.